That's what the people don't want.
You photographers with your autofocus.
I know. Gotta have it. In fact, I was a single point autofocus user until I got that camera, and now everybody's like, "Oh, I need 6,000 frames per second, and it can't ever miss tracking." I'm like, dude, you realize people were shooting wildlife, birds with manual focus like literally 20 years ago. And it was like totally fine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Image Circle Podcast, episode 3. Today, I am joined by somebody you've seen on the channel before, a Mr. Chris Batcheller, the owner of CheckSix Studios.
What's going on, man?
Thanks, man. I have to start this off by saying I did a poll. The videos we did together where you were doing the video work.
Yeah.
And by the way, guys, we are kind of like a quasi-tech stepbrothers now.
Yeah.
Because he's a red shooter, and I'm a Nikon shooter. And so it's like one and the same. We are Nikon red. You know?
Yeah. So, Red got bought by Nikon. So I guess, it's like, your dad bought Nikon or something.
Yeah.
Or bought Red, so we're, I guess that means we have to like hate each other for a little while, like in the Step Brothers movie, and then we can become friends.
Beat the shit out of each other a little bit.
Did we just become best friends?
Did you touch my camera? But what do you think about that price? Because I was looking at 85 mil, and I was like, dude, that's like peanuts for like a big brand. Like,
I was listening to this on another podcast I listened to, and they were saying, it sounds like it's small potatoes, but when you look at the cinematography market, and it's not all that big, right? I mean, how many people are buying, really expensive cameras to go shoot movies, and that market is actually pretty small. So it makes a lot of sense that it wouldn't be valued higher than that right now. I mean, if I had a cool 85 mil hanging around, it certainly would have bought them, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I think the cinematography market is a lot smaller than people realize. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with that as, like AI comes out, and if there's more or less demand for actual shooting, right, where people are kind of subbing in AI stuff for actual shots. I think the market will still be strong, but it is a pretty small market. I don't think people really realize that. I
was really excited about it because about a year and a half ago, I was begging Nikon to do something like cinema focus. And this was after I got the first footage back from us working together. I was like, dude, this is like different.
Sure.
This hits different. And this is like what I want.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny is I actually did a poll. I am most proud of those videos just because like visually they're the most stunning and exciting. And like they're just like so dynamic. But like I did a poll, and what people like more than that, first of all, the gear talk is the number one that people wanted to see.
Right.
Number two was a GoPro POV, which is like my least favorite because I don't pay attention to what I'm shooting at all because I'm paying attention to this. And I also can't use flash really when I do that because it takes up too much space on top.
Sure.
And I was like, dude, that's so heartbreaking because this is clearly the superior, content, clearly. And so, but now that I'm kind of going ham, and we're going to get into that, like as far as marketing, because I'm doing a lot of that myself right now. But I have to get back to the point where I'm putting out content like that because it is just objectively better.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to go shoot some more. And I think when it comes to that, people really don't know what they want. They'll say what they want, but then if you put a bunch of content out about, with just POV views, I think people will get tired of it. To me, that kind of angle is something that you kind of sprinkle in.
Yeah.
You can maybe use it as a filler where you don't have a good cut between two decent angles. You can kind of throw that in and help the audience kind of reorient themselves. But I don't know. I think that a lot of times the audience really doesn't know what they want, and it's up to you as a creator to build that story for them. And if that story is really awesome looking video content, then that's one thing. If it's all point of view or, more of an amateur look, then that's a whole nother story to tell, right?
I think that kind of content lends itself really good to like the shorts format, like the 30-second, 1 minute kind of thing. The POV works really, really good because you can get like the view, the shot, the edit, and you can do like 3 of those in like a minute, and it works really good on that. But like whenever you're talking like doing a voiceover over that, it's like people like that content. But just from studying my analytics, because I'm definitely like I get like the analysis paralysis going on. I dig into that, and I've noticed people want to see me on camera. I don't get as many views when I'm not on camera actually talking. They don't like the voiceovers as much.
And I think that makes sense, right? Because they're coming to your channel to see you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's just your voice, then they're not getting that visual connection to you. But I do think that there's a balance there of getting good video of you and good video of the model, and then, you know, you talking tech or, you know, technique or whatever it is. You know, I've been shooting a lot recently with the Osmo Pocket 3. So I have a Red Komodo, I put it on a gimbal, and then I have a backpack, you know, for stabilization, you know, whole, you know, get up.
You've got the entire spacesuit.
Yeah, I've got the whole thing that goes with that with the Red. But the problem is with the Red is that gear takes, you know, it's heavy. It takes a lot of time to set up. You got to know how to use it. You know, you have focus that you have to worry about. So I've been shooting a lot of my content for my smaller businesses on an Osmo Pocket 3, which is essentially the Red, just kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids down to a very small size. And that Osmo Pocket 3 is about the size of this microphone. You just hold it in your hand. You do all your moves and everything. It takes 2 seconds to set up. It's got a wireless mic that goes along with it, so I can get good audio without having to bring extra claptrap, you know. So I think there's a good balance now that there's equipment that we could get those kinds of shots with the Osmo Pocket 3, and certainly not quite as good as the Red, but similar type shots with a whole lot less effort, right? And so I think that would be a good camera for your channel, because you can put it in selfie mode and hold it and walk around and do walk and talks. Then you can hit the button and flip it around, and then, you know, shoot the model. You can put it on a little monopod even, and then, you know, do kind of you and the model together. I
almost bought one. The only reason I didn't is because they won't hold up in like bad weather. They're not like weather sealed, and I was like, I do enjoy like I probably have like 10 videos where I go, like when I wake up on a Saturday morning and it's raining outside at 7 o'clock, I take my 50mm 1.2 in the camera and I go do water droplets.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like if I'm doing that out there, then like the Osmo is gonna like fry.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of cautious about getting into that.
I mean, I think that's a use case where, I mean, if that's, you know, 5% of what you're shooting, I think the other bits of it would be totally awesome. You know, and this camera is a total game changer for the work that I do, where I'm like, man, I've got thousands of dollars invested in some of this gear, and now some of it just sits in the closet because, you know, it's too much of a pain to get out. But there are going to be times when I have a shoot where I want to use it, and I know, you know, it doesn't go bad, right? So it's definitely, you know, it's definitely going to get used. But yeah, I highly recommend that Osmo Pocket 3, and even if you want to borrow mine and try it out before you spend the, you know, $700-800, whatever it is.
We'll have to go out.
You know.
We'll have to go out and do something kind of short and sweet and simple. You just bring that, and don't worry about, because I remember doing like the shoots. You pop open the back of your Tesla, and it's like you just have like there's like so
spaceship.
much. There's so much like stuff in there, and like I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, I wonder how much of this is just like left over from like a different shoot he did, and how much he's using.
I use everything.
You just kept adding stuff on, and then it was like the canopy, and you were like, grab that and pull it down for me, and then like, and then you have like the car mounts and stuff too.
I would say I use 80 to 90% of the gear that I bring to a shoot every time, and I'm cautious about not bringing too much. And occasionally I forget to bring stuff, which is a whole nother. We could do a whole podcast on that, but on what gear to bring. But yeah, I try and pack specific for each shoot, and really bring only what I'm going to use, you know. But yeah, the Red just takes an incredible amount of time and effort to set up, and then it's heavy and bulky, and, you know, you get fantastic shots out of it, but you know, what other cost, right?
Right.
So actually that would be kind of a fun video we could do, would be a comparison of, you know, I'll come out, bring the Red, we'll bring the Osmo, and we'll kind of do the same shoot back to back.
I would totally do that.
Then we can compare the footage. I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Because I mean, honestly, like I will say, now that I actually kind of figured out like what LUTs were.
Yeah.
So, but you know, with that, I figured out what those were, and I was like, oh, you don't stick those on top of like the image from like a mirrorless camera, because there's already like color work being done to it. Really, it doesn't look as good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the Nikon Z30 is, I picked that up used from like B&H or something for like less than $600, and it has good color.
Yeah.
And so it's like, is it worth going through the, you know, going from like gray footage and grading and stuff like that? Not all the time. I think there's like a place for it.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah. It depends on if you're, you know, what your end use is. So you know, what you're talking about is shooting in a log profile or a raw profile where you basically have this gray looking image. There's, you know, it looks kind of dull and you're like, I didn't get any good footage. But then when you go color grade it, there's a lot more information in that image and you can do a lot more things with it, where you have the darker darks and the higher colors, or the brighter brights and the highlights, right? And so you have a lot more dynamic range to play with in either a log profile or a raw. Whereas if you have a Rec. 709 image, which is already graded or it looks like it has the great colors, right? Those are kind of baked in, and it's a lot harder to adjust the colors and contrast ratios and all those sorts of things if it's baked in. Now, it depends on your end use case, right? If you're shooting something cinematic, of course, you're going to want the most control. So that's when you shoot raw or log. But if you're just shooting something that's like quick and dirty, going to go on social media, nobody's going to be looking at it on an expensive monitor or a big theater, right? Then it makes a lot of sense to shoot already in a Rec. 709 color space where it already looks, you know, basically what you see in the camera is what you get out in real life.
Yeah. For anybody, by the way, I know it's mostly photographers that watch. Anybody who like just got lost in all that, this is like video's version of RAW versus JPEG, right? It's like when I take the Z30 out, I'm essentially shooting in like JPEG. It's got good color and I'm happy with that. But if you're doing like specifically like in the future, I could see the YouTube channel, and this is like well into like being a YouTuber full time, I can see the benefit of always shooting in like a log. That way you can come up with like you can have a LUT that kind of is like with your brand. That's the look of your content.
Right.
Like Peter McKinnon does that. He's got like a look. A grading to his videos. He definitely
has a unique look and to both his video and his photography. And you know, the one thing with LUTs is, and even as photographers, right, is it kind of bakes in a look, but it assumes a specific starting point. So if you use a LUT and the starting point of your image and where the LUT was created isn't really the same, whether it's a darker image or brighter image, or maybe has different contrast ratios, you apply that LUT and you're like, man, this looks like garbage, right? And that's because that LUT was not designed to go on that base image.
Sure.
And so I see these LUT packs out there and people get all excited about, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to drop all these LUTs on. It's going to look amazing. I think a lot of wedding photographers kind of fall into the LUT pack, you know, kind of, I see a lot of people selling LUT packs for wedding photographers. But the truth of the matter is, if you go learn how to grade an image, you know, like we do in the video world, then you're going to get a much better result at the end of the day, because you can control that final image better. Whereas with a LUT, you're just kind of like putting it on there and hoping it looks good, right? So I would highly encourage people, even photographers, to really learn how to do color correction. And by the way, there's two sides. When we do video work, we call it, there's color correction and there's color grading. So you correct the image to be correct. And then once you have a correct image, now you can apply your grading to give it a specific look. And in the video world, there's always like this joke about like Mexico, right? And New York City. New York City is always blue and grays, right?
Yeah.
And Mexico is always like reds and, you know, oranges.
It's warmer.
And warmer, right? And so there's these memes. It's like, you know, Mexico in real life and it's a regular picture, and then Mexico in the movies and it's like orange, right?
I know exactly. I've never heard that, but that's absolute like truth right there. Like that's exactly the case.
But if you learn correct color correction and color grading, you can do that with your photography too. And there's so much more, you know, creative control that you have once you learn how to do those sorts of things. And so highly encourage people to spend the time and really learn that. I just actually completed it was a 3-day class on it, and it was really intensive, but I learned a tremendous amount from this guy who's a master color grader, and he does Amazon and Hulu shows and things like that, and it was really kind of amazing, you know, what I learned in that short amount of time. But it is definitely an art, and it is something you've got to practice a lot.
Right.
So, but you want to talk about marketing, right?
Yeah,
so we got actually, all deep into the gear.
I got to do the that is the best intro that we've had so far, but I want to do the lightning round real quick with Mr. Chris Batcheller here.
No,
so
yes, no.
What genres do you shoot for, like CheckSix?
Yeah, so we're kind of general in what we shoot because we're in Wichita and there's not a lot of opportunity to specialize here because the market itself isn't very big. I like to do passion projects, which are more documentary oriented. And then on the business side, typically it's small business marketing is typically what we do. So do a lot of service-based businesses, businesses that I've actually done some product photography and e-commerce stuff here lately. And so that stuff's kind of exciting. So yeah, we're a little bit all over the board as far as who we help. But one thing that is really I'm really passionate about is when I was in marketing corporate, we would hire agencies and they would have people work on our accounts that didn't know anything about our products or services, right? And so I was brought in as the expert to like, no, you can't say that because, it's either going to be offensive or not going to resonate. And so I make sure that if I take a client on, that I really understand their market, I understand their customer, and I understand, what's going to work for them. Now, it may take me some research to go figure that out. But I really am kind of strong on making sure that if I take a customer on, that I know that I can do something for their space.
What's your guilty pleasure shoot? What video or photography? It's like whenever you're like, I need a break from the work stuff, and you just shoot something you want to shoot.
Oh, I thought I was going to tell you my guilty pleasure is buying gear, but
that's everybody's.
Yeah, I think that's everybody on this channel at least. I really enjoy the documentary stuff and talking to people and learning their stories and getting them to tell their stories. When they are real, that's really the thing that I enjoy. And a lot of people, when you get them on camera, they'll kind of have this candy shell on them. They'll want to be a little glossy, and I really like, getting into an interview with somebody, and then 15 or 20 minutes later, you kind of get a rapport back and forth, and then they start to forget the cameras are there, and they start to open up a little bit. And that, to me, that's really the most fun challenge when I'm interviewing somebody for that. So I guess that might be a little bit of a guilty pleasure.
I got you. Do you have like a dream videography shoot?
I do aviation and shoots for, I have another brand called My Bombshells, mybombshells.com. And I really love doing the air-to-air photography and videography for that.
By the way, as if this guy isn't great at marketing and great at videography and great at photography, he's also a freaking pilot. So
well, yeah, there's that too.
I see pictures on Facebook and stuff of you and your daughter, like, oh, it's a selfie and you're in an airplane, and I'm terrified of flying, but I don't even know where you guys go. But.
Yeah, so my daughter just announced she wants to be an airline pilot. So nice. And I'm actually been a flight instructor for 20 years. So I'm like, okay, well, I got to teach you how to fly, because I had enough bonehead flight instructors that I don't really want anybody else teaching her to start with. So yeah, we go flying every now and then, and hopefully by the time she graduates, she'll be able to go on and get an airline career going.
That's awesome. Yeah, get a bunch of. Is there like an age restriction on when you can start building flight hours?
Not really when you can start building, but you do have to be 16 to solo and 17 to get your pilot's license.
I got you.
But
so
you can do it a little.
She's gonna have a bunch of hours already.
Yeah, we should be able to get her license right when she turns 17. But you can do it a little earlier as a glider pilot, but then you
that's
have to fly gliders.
That's an absolute blessing, because isn't like just paying somebody to get those flight hours like an instructor has got to be super outrageously expensive.
$7,500 an hour for an instructor, plus you got to pay for the airplane. So yeah, she's getting a pretty big gift from her old man.
Do you guys do you have your own plane or
no?
Do you rent one?
I don't. I rent right now. Yeah, I've looked at buying one, and so far it hasn't made financial sense. When I grow the business a little bit bigger, maybe if I start doing work in Dallas or Kansas City or Oklahoma City, that sort of thing, it might make sense to have an airplane.
I got you. I don't even know if it's possible, but at some point, I think it would make a great video, because I'm absolutely deathly afraid of flying. It would be a cool video to get me up in an airplane to take a picture of something from the air.
We can do that. We can make that happen.
Just let me know how much it is to like rent an airplane, and maybe because my YouTube channel is actually making like what I would consider legit side hustle money. It actually pays for itself now.
Right.
And so every month there's a little bit of kind of carry over to the next month. And so it's like now I'm looking at things, it's like I don't have to come out of pocket quite so much anymore.
Well, it's funny, aerial photography, air to ground stuff has really gone almost to zero, because people are just using drones now.
Yeah.
And it's so much cheaper to do it with a drone.
There's no way it's as fun though.
No, it's nothing like being in the air. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm terrified of being in the air, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you.
Well, I can't be any worse than the airlines. I'll tell you that much.
That's a good point. I just a little side story. This is why I love this podcast, is because I would never think to have this conversation unless we were recording right now. But I was coming into from Houston to ICT.
Right, to Wichita.
Yeah, I think it was either whenever I was landing in Houston or whenever I was landing back. But came in. It was awful dang windy.
Yeah.
And,
probably Wichita.
yeah, the airplane was like doing this kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I swear we were so sideways that, I mean, like when you look out like a commercial airliner,
right.
you don't see
you can't
this
see
way
down
that
the
much.
runway, yeah.
I could see the runway out the window, and I was like, we're gonna roll. We're gonna hit and roll. But it was actually one of the smoothest landings ever. He brought it back, and I swear, like as soon as it seemed like, of course, I'm terrified, so I'm probably over dramatizing this thing. But I swear, I was like looking out the window, and I was like, "Oh no, this is it." And then he just, boom,
greased it in,
just smooth. And I was like,
"It's probably an old B-52 pilot, not a Navy pilot. They would have slammed it down."
Yeah, I've definitely had like some. I've definitely had some rough ones coming back to Wichita.
Yeah,
but generally, like landing in Texas has always been smooth.
Yeah. But the wind here is horrible.
Yeah, you get like a nasty crosswind.
Well, it's just always windy here, right? I mean, it's the only place I've ever flown in my life where at night you come in with a full crosswind, and
that's got to
normally
be
normally the wind dies down at night and it's all smooth, right?
Right.
And not in Wichita. It's just windy all the time.
Yeah. That's absolutely terrifying. So, what do you think your greatest strength is, like in the business, like I guess the videography business? What's your greatest strength in that? Do you think it's the marketing?
So I think my greatest strength is being being able to tie art and commerce together. And I'm really proud of that, because I think I'm a pretty good creative director. I'm able to recognize that I don't have all the creative talents, right? So there's a lot of work that I know people similar to like yourself, and I'll hire them to do a portion of something on a project. But I'm really good at tying it all together and knowing what money to spend on creative that will actually get us a return on the marketing side. And I think that's really where my skills are best used.
Yeah, definitely like creative director kind of territory on that. Well, what's one thing you can improve on?
I'm always really critical of, and this is going to sound stupid, but I'm always really critical of my videography and my photography, right? I'm like, and sometimes I'll get started on an edit session. I'm like, oh, this is all terrible. And then, by the time I get through the edit, I'm like, okay, this isn't so bad. Right.
Right.
But so I would say, as far as that goes, I think the thing that I probably, could use the most work on is really, and I've gotten a lot better, but is the details. And so I've actually gotten really a lot better on this. But when I first started shooting, it was like, you go shoot and then you get back in the edit and you realize that somebody's hair is wild or something, or there's a stain on their shirt or, whatever. So I've gotten a lot better at that. But I would say that I'm generally more of a strategic oriented person. So I have to really intentionally make sure I look at the details when I do a shoot. And I would say I've gotten 5,000% better on that, but it's still something that I'm like, okay, I got to make sure
why didn't I catch that ahead of time?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. I get that. And honestly, if anything, I have gotten, I used to be like hyper detailed on that, like in the field. Mm-hmm. And I've actually gotten away from that a little bit.
Bit better,
just because, one, Photoshop has gotten so good, and two,
and faster, right?
Way faster. It's not nearly as much of a RAM hog,
right?
Like it used to be, and also it's just so easy that like instead of being like, oh crap, there's a stain on the shirt, I literally just like I recently the most impressive content aware fill that I did, it was like a 60 people in a family at this family reunion. They literally brought me out there just to take a few pictures of the entire family reunion.
Wow.
And all the elderly were sitting in chairs in the front.
Right.
And I didn't even think about it because I don't like doing the paid work.
Yeah.
And so I miss things whenever I'm doing that, And I don't do it enough. All of their walkers and their crutches and stuff were folded up under their chairs.
Oh,
and so I literally did a content-aware fill of
on each
like
one.
I circled all of those and had Photoshop draw inspiration from the grass.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely unnoticeable.
Yeah,
Perfect.
It's amazing what it does now. The conclusion I came to recently was when I'm doing a multi-camera interview shoot, I need to hire a second person to be there to help me. First of all, there's a ton of gear that gets lugged in and out with something like that. So just somebody to help, with the gear. But then also I need to have somebody that can help with the lighting, where they can focus on making sure the set is lit, and then, taking care of all the background and getting all the little things out of the background or whatever. And then I can just focus on the cameras, because this last shoot that I did, I was going nuts because, you always forget something, right? Whether it's focus or it's, making sure that you format your cards, or, and getting the audio to sync up and all that. So there's just a lot going on there. And that's, I think, a revolution that I had recently was like, okay, I've gotten better at the details, but now there's literally too much work for one person to reasonably do this, right?
Well, even doing this podcast is like kind of tough just with two cameras, because it's usually, so far, both the other two podcasts I've done, the first one, I happened to look over to notice that one had stopped.
Right.
And the second one, I actually only noticed after about 30 seconds because the model saw the screen blink out of the corner of her eye, and I saw her look over at it, and I looked over and I was like, okay, it's down. So even in like this kind of small setup, it would be nice to have somebody that's actually monitoring this crap,
Absolutely.
Just like one one person.
You need a producer for sure.
And ideally that's where I'd like to be. It's like with the Joe Rogan Experience, you got Jamie, he's doing all that, he's doing
and they can become part of the show, actually.
For sure. For sure. I actually like the on the comedic podcasts, I like when their producers bust up laughing. That actually makes the show better. So
are we done with the lightning round? Did I survive?
Actually we
that was easier than I thought it was going to be.
Well, it normally.
Come on, you didn't ask any hard questions.
Well, that's just like it's a slight getting to know you. The second part is none of it's really like grilling.
All right, I gotta get ready for this next part. It sounds like it's gonna be hard. Will there be a test later?
No, yes, there will be. First of all, how long have you been? Because I know you were doing the videography before. Because I know like you were camera shopping like not that long ago. We had already worked together, so you're on the video side first,
right?
So like, how long have you been doing that, and like, what made you like want to get into like videography specifically?
Sure, yeah. So I've been shooting photography since high school, and I've been I've been out of high school for a long time. So I started with a old Pentax K1000 and developing black and white in the high school dark room, and got to college, and when I was in college, digital cameras were starting to come around, so I shot. Most of college I shot with slide, on slides. And then, towards the end of my college days, the digital cameras were starting to become affordable and more, mass available. And so I moved into digital back then. I've shot photography for a long time. And then, I would say in the last, it's like been the last 7-8 years, I moved into video. And I started out with the Panasonic cameras, the S1s, which I still have 2 of those.
They're still the Panasonics are still like hugely popular.
Yeah,
nobody really cares about them for like photography.
Right.
Not that they're not perfectly fine cameras, but specifically for video, they kick so much ass.
Yeah, they have fantastic for the cost. You cannot beat a Panasonic S1 for just a straight up video camera.
Yeah,
right?
Their stabilization is just like. Really incredibly. What is it, like the GH?
The GH series has really good stabilization, but the image you can get out of them is just fantastic. It's just absolutely the best bang for the buck. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I kind of transitioned up into the Red camera family. I have a Red Komodo that I shoot with now. And, in a bigger city, you would just rent this thing, right? Like you would have a shoot, you'd rent it and bring it back. Well, we're in Wichita, Kansas, and it takes like days to ship here and days to ship back.
Yeah.
And rental, it's just not practical to rent here. So you have to buy. So I kind of took a leap of faith and bought a Red Komodo. And what's interesting is I actually use my Panasonic S1s or now I use an S5 2X. Which is just a better version of the S1 with better autofocus. But I use that as my B cam and my two or three camera interviews, and they all cut together. Mm-hmm. That's really awesome that that you can get that such a low cost camera to actually cut together with an image of the Red Komodo. So you know, it's really kind of interesting. But yeah, I've been doing video now for, you know, 7-8 years or so. And like everything else, it's been an evolution where, you know, I started out and it wasn't really all that great. And then you kind of go through different areas where you learn how to do storytelling. You learn about audio, you learn about color correction and color grading and those sorts of things. And I would say now I'm to the level where I've kind of got all that stuff sort of figured out, and I'm just, you know, basically cranking stuff out. Yeah.
So you got like pretty well rounded, because like you got better at the cameras as well as like the storytelling. And me, like, I consider myself like incredibly savvy, like with all of my gear.
Right.
But like that's one thing I could work on, is the actual storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
I have a hard time telling a story like on the spot, but like I've crafted like many kind of progression stories.
Sure.
You know, Wife Material was like the first one that I really put a lot of like work into.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
and so there's other ones. I just can't find people to do it. You know,
Yeah,
but I have
sure.
like kind of underlying themes. You know, like service members and PTSD, and just something you don't need words for, but it just follows like a picture. But I have to plan those things. I can't just.
Yeah.
I need to get better at like telling a story on the spot,
Well,
identifying the story in the field.
I don't know that you need to. I mean, if you look at any sitcom that you like or any movie that you like, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people that put that together, and that's a realization that I came to, you know, a couple of years ago, was like, man, I'm just not as good as, you know, this other final product, right? I'm comparing myself to like, you know, mega $1 million budget things, right? Which isn't fair. But then I started kind of getting into that industry and listening to podcasts about it, and really it's like, well, like, holy crap, you know, if they go make a movie, there's a couple thousand people involved, like soup to nuts. There's writers, there's producers, there's showrunners, there's, you know, there's all these people involved, and it really doesn't come down to one or two people ever. It's always a collaboration. So that gave me some room to be a little bit easier on myself, to be like, okay, I'm just one person.
Right.
You know, so that's when I really started to systematically get, okay, I'm going to get better at this little piece. I'm going to get better at this little piece.
Let me work on my writing this time, and then I'll get on the production.
Right. Because when they go shoot a movie, everything is, there's storyboards. There's a picture of what the camera's going to take a picture. You know, there's a script supervisor that's making sure the lines are being read right. So I would say you're, you know, having to do it on the spot. I wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself for that, because, I mean, in reality, all that stuff is pre-scripted. If you want to come with a couple of bullet points and you know, that sort of thing, I think that's fantastic. But I wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself to be like an instant storyteller, because nobody is an instant storyteller. I mean, even your favorite comedians, I mean, they're just saying the same things over and over again.
Yeah, well, they have specific stages that they go to kind of practice material and find out what bombs and what doesn't work, you know? So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Just since we do have gear junkies that like watch the channel,
sure.
We kind of mentioned like the gear that you use, but just like real quick, like what's your video camera and like your lenses, and then like what photography cameras and lenses do you use?
Yeah, so I use a couple different things. For video, I have the Red Komodo, and I shoot primarily with the DZO prime lenses, and then I also have the DZO Vespid zooms that I use. And then I also have the Panasonic cameras. So I have a couple of Panasonic S1s, and then I also have a Panasonic S5 2X, which is their upgraded version of the S1. It's a full frame camera, but it has better autofocus, right? Where Panasonics have traditionally had crappy autofocus. The S5 2X has better. It's not quite as good as Canon or Nikon, but it is leagues better than it was.
Right.
And so I use that camera as a photography camera in the studio, and then I use that also as a second camera to the Red Komodo. And then I have a Canon R8 that I use for sports photography, because my daughter does sports,
right.
And my son is into motorsports and race cars and stuff like that. So we have need to shoot high speed, you know, stuff, and that R8 will do 40 frames a second.
Right.
So I went out and bought it, you know, the 100 to 500 zoom lens for that, the RF. It's a fantastic lens. So I use that for all the sports stuff, and so I kind of use a combination of those depending on what's going on each day. You got
a more vast collection of stuff than I do, Chris. And
I don't know about that.
I've got a lot of stuff down there. Is there like a particular piece of gear that you know that you would love to have, but you know you'll never have? Like something like an Ari.
No. The Ari would be fantastic to have. I think the thing that I would really love to have right now would be a robotic arm, a cinema arm. But they're starting, big dollars. Like, you could buy a car for what these things cost. So
they're $50,000-$60,000.
Easy. Yeah. 100,000 is, I think, a decent starting point. So I don't know that I'll ever have one of those, but yeah, if I get big enough projects, then I would definitely love to have that.
Yeah. I think for me, really the only kind of, I would like to actually have like every single piece of Nikon Z lens, whether I like it or not.
Right.
That's really dumb because I also don't like stuff sitting on the shelf. So that would be like stupid money. Like if I just had stupid money, I would just buy this stuff and I would just have it to be like the best person on YouTube for you to watch because I got every single piece of it. But I think like just like one single piece, I would probably just like the Nikon 600mm f4, which is about a $15,700 lens.
Ooh, yeah.
And so like I know I'll never have it. One, because it's outrageously expensive, and two, I actually would probably not use it that much.
Right. Sure.
It's like I'd like to have it because it's unattainable.
Yeah.
But I actually know for a fact that I don't shoot wildlife. I don't even enjoy it that much.
Right.
Or sports. Like I don't even like watching sports. But
if I had unlimited money to invest, I don't know that it would be in gear. I think I would invest it in people. I would build the
best damn team you could possibly.
I would put an amazing team together, and the only thing that's preventing that right now is just volume of work, right? And so if I had an instant amount of work that would support a large team, I would absolutely love to have a gang of super cool creative people that we could go do some awesome stuff with.
That's absolutely what. That's kind of like what I'm trying to do, like with this YouTube channel. Like before I start taking a paycheck for myself, I want to give somebody else a paycheck to do something that way. And it, with every single piece will allow me to spend my time on the creative aspects of things, writing the script, taking the pictures, being out in the field and doing the stuff. And so like the first thing will probably be like a video editor. You take care of that. And then, somebody that does better than me, which won't be hard to find, but I'll have somebody do that, and then I'll probably next I would bring on somebody specifically to do the thumbnails, because for the life of me I can't make a good thumbnail like that's on the same level as everybody else. I would rather pay somebody to do that every single time, and then I might start taking like a kind of paycheck for myself.
But, I mean that's just a good graphic designer that can do that kind of work. Like
I have Canva, I just don't know how to make it look cool.
Oh man, you're killing me with Canva.
It's the only
I go to Canva to take graphics that I put in other programs.
I just haven't put the time into eventually I'll put the time in to actually do it on Photoshop, but whenever I was doing it in Photoshop, it seemed like every time I needed something you had to pay for the you have to pay for like the graphic. I didn't find like a good place that just had free graphics.
Sure.
Because like now that the channel is monetized, it's like I can't use anything. Everything has to have a license for it.
Do you have Canva Vision now?
I don't even know what that is.
Canva Vision's when you're looking at something online, you're like, oh, they totally did that in Canva.
Oh yeah, I can totally identify other YouTubers.
Yeah.
Because like, see me, what I don't do is I don't take the suggestions that they have, like the template. I always make my own. But I see them all over YouTube. It's like, dude, that's literally the fifth one on the list of the templates.
Oh, yeah,
I see it all the time.
Yeah, I see it at, in corporate, we see flyers up all the time. I'm like, yeah, it's totally Canva.
Yeah. What's crazy is like I'll make a thumbnail that I think looks really cool. Like I'll take an actual picture from the video that you're going to be watching, and I'll just slightly blur it and put it in the background. And then I'll do like a little graphic of like whatever the title is, like the Nikon Z8 and 24mm f1.8s. I'll put a little Z8 and then a little camera lens, and for whatever reason, they do like whenever there's a human face on it. And so like I'll have myself like this, like with the lenses floating. And people hate it. What they actually click on more is a plain yellow background, because it's mostly Nikon people, with like the black little explosion thing with like me and the gear on it. Like,
Yeah,
it's
so-
actually more simple.
So there,
But-
I mean, again, that's a whole nother podcast. That's there's some really interesting stuff to dive into there. So I did a master's in media psychology. And
oh God!
it's
Do
really,
we need to do a podcast
do.
on that?
But that's, there's some real psychology behind
Yeah.
what attracts your attention and what doesn't, and it's really interesting stuff.
I mean, even just to not dive into it too much, because that is going to be, we need to do that because that's going to be a really interesting podcast. But just something as simple as like contrasting colors.
Sure.
People, you don't know why one of my pictures looks better than other ones you've seen recently, and it's literally because I knew that we were shooting in downtown Augusta, which has orange reddish bricks, and I put my model in a teal shirt, right? Because that's a contrasting color. It's like, why does that look so good?
It's how your eyes work,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean,
yeah, people don't.
Yeah.
It gets to the point now where it's like I get frustrated because I want to have the best image that I possibly
Sure.
can. And so, like, I'll tell the models, it's like, okay, we're shooting at the park right now. It's summertime. Everything is super duper green. Get me something red.
yeah.
Like the main part of your, and they're like, what do you want to do for accessories? Okay, and then I'll just go to like the Canva color wheel and I'll
Right.
do like tricolor.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then they just show up in whatever they want. I'm just like, I'll shoot it and we'll have a good time.
So
but-
I'll lead you down a little rabbit hole and then we can move on. But have you ever walked on a path or something and then you see a stick on the ground and your brain goes snake and you look at it a second time, you're like, oh no, it's just a stick.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
That's happened to you, right?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is your brain is actually dual processing all the time. And one is going to the older part of your brain, which is much faster at processing, and then the other is going to your frontal cortex, which is much slower at processing, but it can do it at a higher fidelity. So that first time when you were like, oh my gosh, that's a snake, that's the old part of your brain going, danger, Will Robinson, right? And then the front part of your brain finishes the processing of it, and then you're like, oh no, that's just a stick.
It like instantly, like your brain, like, without you even realizing it, it's going to the worst case scenario because it's the fastest to get your attention, and
Right.
then the other part rationalizes.
Yeah, so it's always at the same time dual processing everything that you see because it's evaluating it for danger. And that comes back from, when we were running around the woods and trying not to be eaten by saber-toothed tigers and things like that.
What I'll probably do, you'll probably be the first person this channel brings on full time because I need you to be.
I could just sit in the
you
back
need to-
and heckle. Like, what were those two Muppet guys that were, they would just heckle everybody?
Oh God, I don't know.
I don't remember. Yeah, they had funny names, but anyway,
I
could
don't
do
know
that.
anything about the Muppets. The Sesame Street was in when the
no,
Muppets. I think the Muppets were out whenever I was a kid.
I think it's like Waldorf and something else is the guy's name. Anyhow.
But let's see. Let's go into this is a great podcast so far.
Well, we've been all over the place,
We
but we
have
haven't
been.
talked anything about marketing.
Yeah,
so.
well, we haven't got through the.
Your viewers are like, "Hey, I think this was clickbait here, man."
Yeah, I've gotten to the way I structured this was like lightning round, getting to know you, and
All
then
right.
like main topic of the discussion. But I
Cool.
think we kind of just I think people have gotten a good sense like of your personality and
All
kind of
right.
what you do.
Yep,
So
yep.
let's get into the marketing. Can you talk?
I love it.
Can you talk a little bit on like how do you market? Do you think it's more important to market yourself first or like your brand first?
It's really a hard one to answer because yourself is your brand, right? If you
Well, for me, for sure. Like,
no, for
because, like,
anybody.
Well, I mean,
if
not-
you're a photographer,
not if you're like a manufacturer.
well, okay,
making
if you're,
trinkets.
if you're Nikon or
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it really just depends on how you want to be marketed. The thing is, if you market yourself as your name, you can never sell your business because your name is your business. I mean, I suppose you could, but it would be very difficult.
Yeah,
you would have
Z-Wade
to
photo can't be sold. As
right.
Z-Wade photo.
You would have to rename it, or you would have to get incredibly big and just go buy your island and find somebody else that can do what you do, right? So I think that would just limit how you could sell it. Now, if your name Z-Wade Photo is something else that's not so personal, then I think you could then be absorbed by a bigger studio or whatever. So there's that consideration right off the bat. But your name is your brand. So even if you name your business like mine is CheckSix Creative Studio, okay, my name is Chris Batcheller, and that's my brand. So when people look up CheckSix Creative Studio, my name also comes up. You go look at my LinkedIn profile, you go look at Instagram, whatever it is. And so, I think people make the mistake of, your name is your brand. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And so if
Right.
you're on Facebook and you're doing political rants and all this kind of stuff, you're immediately going to isolate your customer base because, you know, whichever side you're on, right? The other side is not going to be your customer. And so I think people need to be really careful about that, especially in the age of social media, as far as what you're putting out there, that your name is your brand, whether or not you're directly associating with your company or not. And that goes for anybody who has a job even, right? I mean, if you have a job at a corporation and you're out in social media and, you know, whatever you're putting out there, then, you know, basically recruiters are looking at that. Your coworkers are looking at that. And so it can really limit you on future opportunities.
And I feel like, I mean, depending on what level of success your business is at, kind of depends on, like, if you screw up in some way, if you're really successful, people will be like, CheckSix Studios, Creative Studios sucks. But, like, if you're smaller, they're going to be like, that Chris Batcheller guy is like a real piece, you know?
I don't know. I mean, I've had...
But if you treat it like... If you treat like the, you know, your brand is you, then you just kind of operate within like a like I don't my YouTube channel is like not I'm genuine on like what I put across, but like the full spectrum of my humor does not go on YouTube. It can't. Like it absolutely can't. That's for at work, and that's for like when you and I shut the cameras off and you know. And that's when the shop talk or the dark humor or whatever. But like this is my brand, and I am directly associated with, you know, it's like this face is it.
So I would say you have to be, in whatever you do, you have to be genuine, right? Because if you're too fake for the camera or you're too fake on social media, people will for sure identify that. As humans, we're really good at being able to suss out when somebody is being fake. And so I would say that don't be fake, but like you said, you don't have to be completely vulnerable either, right? I mean, there are some conversations that are not meant for YouTube or Facebook, right? Like, I mean, I've literally taken people off of my Facebook where, you know, even on the friend side where I just unfriend somebody because I don't want to hear their bull crap. You know, like I don't care, or if they're particularly out there talking derogatory about someone or whatever, I'm like, well, they might say that about me, so unfriend. Right? So I would just say that, you know, your brand is, your name and your brand are synonymous with each other, and to just be really cognizant of that fact that once you go into business and you put your name out there, you put your face out there, you put your brand out there, you know, who your brand is how your customers are going to perceive you. Now, it's another interesting, and again, whole new podcast, right, on brands that have taken political stances or social justice stances or whatnot. And I'm not getting on any side of any of this, but I'm just saying that if you get on a certain side of a social justice issue that is particularly polarizing, don't forget you're going to alienate some group of buyers. And today people feel very connected about buying consciously, or feeling good about their purchases. So they're not going to buy from a brand or do business with a brand that they don't believe has the same values that they do. So, you know.
That's something I avoid as far as, well, like my brand Z-Wade Photo goes. I love a thoughtful discussion about science versus religion or political stances or issues. I enjoy a thoughtful discussion as much as like anybody.
But it's not necessarily a camera topic, right?
It's not.
Now when those filthy Canon boys come on here, you know.
Well, like you have a Canon camera.
I know, right?
You filth.
You filthy, dirty dog.
No, I actually like. I like all the brands. I was the first one. I was the first one that like I knew of that was coming out, and you know I used everything because there for a while, like Nikon fanboyism was only second to Fuji fanboys. It was really bad, and I just decided I wanted to try all the big three, and I did, and I'm like, wow, you know what? They all operate about the damn same.
Yeah,
like it's all good.
I used to actually shoot Nikon back in the day, and it was because I was shooting air shows in the summer. And at the big air show in Oshkosh, Nikon was the big sponsor. And so if you had a Nikon camera, you could go into the Nikon. They had a little photo booth or a media booth, and I was going with press credentials. And you know, you could go into the media booth and just say I wanted to borrow this $15,000 lens, and they're like, all right, they write your name down, they take a photocopy of your license, and then hand you this incredible lens to go shoot with for the day, you know? And so
that sounds beautiful.
So I was shooting Nikon, then I got there one year and they had switched to Canon. So I was like, well, crap. So now I had a Nikon camera and I only had a couple lenses with me. So the next year I came back and I switched over to Canon gear, and I've pretty much.
And then they switched to Sony.
No, they haven't switched to Sony yet. It's still Canon as far as I know. But I mean, so, I kind of shoot. I think it's important to just use the gear that's right for you.
Yeah, get comfortable. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you don't have a camera at all, don't necessarily buy from Best Buy. I like to encourage people to buy from like camera sellers.
Sure.
Not like big box stores, but go and like find out the price range that you have. Don't bother grabbing the $5,500 one.
Right.
But touch all of the ones, hold them in your hand, because like for me, I can never be a Sony guy because the Sonys dig in right here. And so get what's comfortable, because something that's comfortable or something that's uncomfortable, you're not going to want to get out and shoot it. But if it feels good in your hand, then you get excited about it. Like it's comfortable to hold, and you'll get out and do it.
I mean, there's that. I would also say, if I was going to go into wedding photography, I wouldn't necessarily buy Nikon or Canon, because Sony has that really wrapped up, I think, as far as their low light ability. Their autofocus, I think, is better for low light, those sorts of things. But that's where that brand shines. There's specific genres of photography where I think different brands outshine the others. But I think you just use the one that makes the most sense for you, and then once you invest in an ecosystem, stay with that ecosystem. Because it's expensive to switch.
It's not going to take long. Like, I mean, Sony had everybody bent over a barrel for a long time, and really just until recently, the only game in town that even competed, Nikon versus Sony, was the Z9, and then like the Z8. That was it. Like now, those will find an eye in pitch black.
Yeah.
So underexposed that your meter is like blinking.
Right.
None of the other Nikons will do that, though. Admittedly,
Well, if you want a rabbit hole to go down, research where the sensors are made and who makes the sensors.
Sony makes like all of them.
Sony's got a huge portion of the market. So yeah.
On the back on the marketing topic, how much? This is just kind of an interesting question that I don't really know the answer to. You might. How hard do you find color scheme to be incredibly important in branding, and how hard do you go on your color scheme? So everywhere that you can put it?
It really depends on the brand and the vibe of the brand. We like to do, for our marketing, we like to do a brand, basically a brand guide, which is, a several page PDF that we put together, and it's like, here's your colors, here's the hexadom, here's the hex numbers for your colors, here's the Pantone colors, so that when we're doing marketing for them, there's consistency throughout all of the things, right? So, if we do a design for a T-shirt, we can have CMYK colors versus, web colors, those sorts of things. But we really like to do a brand guide to show you how the logos are going to be used, what's the tone of the brand, what sort of the imagery is going to look like, all that sort of thing. And that's really step one in, setting up your business brand, is really defining how your brand looks, and how you want to use it. And then within that, we would sort of define the color scheme, here's your primary colors, secondary colors, accent colors, all that kind of stuff. And that will sort of define how hard we go. And that question really depends on the brand itself, right? If you have a, brand that is fun and, is maybe an e-commerce brand, and they're going to be lighthearted, that color scheme is going to be a lot different from, say, a CPA firm.
Might be a little lighter and airy.
Yeah. Now you could have a CPA firm that has a fun attitude, right? But generally they don't. They want a very professional look and a very toned down kind of thing. So it really just depends on the business itself, and I really base that off of, a lot of times, whoever my primary contact is going to be, usually it's a business owner or a marketing director or something like that. And I go, okay, what there's two sides of this. They can ask me what I think that they should do, right? Which sometimes is a little bit more kind of over the ledge of where they might be comfortable. So I always try and ask the customer, like, hey, what are you comfortable with? What's your vision here? All that kind of stuff. And then I can sort of push them in a direction or two, right, that I think will hit with the consumers. But yeah, there's really no one answer to that. And it's really all about matching the brand with the actual customer. Cause you know, if you build a brand that's really fun and then the customer goes and has a boring experience, there's incongruency there. Right. And they're going to be like, no, this is fake. Right. And again, going back to, as humans, we're really good at detecting fake. And even when we detect fake and we don't know that what we're detecting is fake, we're like, something's up with that.
It's like getting clickbaited by by a pamphlet that you saw. I'm going to go try this out, and you show up, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
See, this is why I mean I know nothing about like marketing really, but at the same time, marketing is a really honestly we could probably do another podcast on more marketing.
I love it. Yeah.
Just because there really is no simple question. It's like how much do you dedicate to the color scheme? So you're like, well, you have to ask yourself, what is your color scheme going to be?
Right.
And it needs to reflect your brand, because you're not going to put out like an alternative clothing brand that's filled up with pastel colors. Like,
you may, like, it all depends.
Not like goth clothes.
Yeah. But it just really depends on if you do complementary colors or, opposing color schemes. But that brand really has to reflect the product and the services that the customers are going to get. So
let's. I want to jump into real quick because I have a bunch of photographers. A lot. I mean, tons of hobbyists, but I'm sure somewhere there's somebody that is looking to start getting into like the paid work. So if let's say like the first 5 things they need to do to make sure they start off with like a good looking brand and get everything set up right, a good image to start out. How do they start marketing themselves? Like step 1.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'll give you exactly 5, but I may underperform or overperform here. But
sure.
I would say if you're going to do photography, and we're talking photography, right, as a paid business, I think there's a couple of things you need to do. You need to sit down and really have a serious internal conversation with yourself about the expectations of this, right? Because the photography world right now, cameras are so cheap that everybody calls themselves a photographer, right? And there are different levels of, there's like Ansel Adams on one end, and then there's like, that lady that gets in front of the wedding photographer in the middle of the aisle as the bride and groom are coming down, right? That, Aunt Betty thinks she's a photographer, right? But, and you can totally start out with an iPhone on this stuff. And so, that has added a new spectrum to it. Like literally everybody has a potential to be a paid photographer these days. And you really have to sit down with yourself and have the conversation about, do I really want to put the time and effort into turning this hobby into a business? And what are your goals with that business? Are you just trying to recoup the cost of your hobby? Because that's one level of being in business. Are you trying to live full time off of this and put food on your table? That's a whole nother level, right? So I would say if you're going to start a photography business and market yourself, really have that conversation. Go talk to other photographers that are doing this for a living. Find out where the hard spots are.
I've told people that before. It's like, but before you start doing paid work, you have to be super duper honest with yourself, and you can't be like the people on American Idol where it's like a couple people told you were good and you get on there and you embarrass yourself. You have to look at what other people are producing in your area, and you need to be honest with yourself on how your work stacks up against theirs, and you need to charge appropriately.
I think that's exactly right. You need to see where your level is at and where your competition is at and where you want to go, right? I would say in general, because their market is so flooded that we really undervalue photographers in this country, at least. I don't know about other countries, but I know there are so many people that are willing to work for literally next to nothing that it's really a big problem. So I would say, and it's like anything else, the top X% is going to get the majority of the cash, right? So if you're just starting out as a photographer, don't expect big bucks, right?
Yeah.
And so, I would say have that serious conversation with yourself. That's number one. Once you've had that conversation with yourself and you have evaluated the market and sort of figured out where you fit into the current, the current photography market in your local area, you can say, well, I'm here today. I want to get to here tomorrow, or, not literally tomorrow, but let's say a year or 2 or 3 years from now, really put together a plan of how you want to increase your skill set to be able to get to where you want to go. Right. And so once you've sort of mapped that out, then you can start thinking about your brand, right? Because you don't necessarily want to make the brand for where you are today. You want to make the brand for where you want to go in a couple of years, right? And a lot of people will be hesitant to invest in building their brand creatively. So they won't invest on doing a logo. They won't invest on having a professional graphic artist create the brand guide for them, that sort of thing. And I would say that's a huge mistake for somebody that is truly serious about it and wants to invest in their business.
And if anything, it's more, you talked about like the industry as a whole being so saturated, like it would probably do you some good to really take your time and get that set up and get that brand thought out first.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is they're just gonna go on Facebook and be like $30 mini sessions.
Yeah. So here's the thing, a lot of people don't think about. If you create, and a lot of people like to make their own logo, and good on them, but there are a lot of people that are really bad at making logos, right? And for better or worse, a logo can really set the tone of a brand. So I would say if you're really serious about your photography business, then your logo needs to reflect where you want to be in a couple of years. Because once you create that logo and put it out there in the world, there's like no go backsies.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the Coke logos or the Pepsi logos over the years, they've changed a little bit. But by and large, you'll still recognize a Pepsi logo from the 1930s, right? Whereas, if you do a radical redesign of your logo, it's like starting at square one. You have no recognition. And so we generally say in marketing, people have to see you or your brand about 7 times before they have enough familiarity with it to be like, okay, I'm going to spend some money there.
Yeah.
And so if you change your brand logo look, midstream, after a couple of years, then you're again starting from square one. So that's what would be my recommendation is, do that upfront introspective work, and then, look at where your brand where you want to take the brand, and then use that as your starting point for how you're going to design your brand, whether it's going to be elegant or classy or fun or, whatever you want your look to be. If you're doing a children's photography, right, and your brand doesn't really look like that, then again, you're going to have that incongruency and people are going to be like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
Right.
I ran into, well, first of all, I biffed up a little bit like on my the Z-Wade photo logo, because that's pretty much, I've basically dedicated myself to wearing glasses and having a beard, because that's what's in like the Aperture logo. But, I since I'm not doing like the paid work and stuff like that, I'm not like I consider like my channel to be on like the entertainment side.
Sure.
And so it's not, I don't think it's that big of a deal for like me, but definitely like if I was gonna be like Z-Wade Photo, the company that does, first of all, I wouldn't call it Z-Wade Photo if I was going to be a professional photographer. I wouldn't do that. I would come up with something that's actually sellable. If I ever decide I don't want to do this anymore, but like I have this kind of clientele and stuff built up or whatever.
I think there's a lot you could do with your brand. I mean, look at Frono's photo, right? If you go look at his logo, and he's known for the big fro, for his hair. He sells T-shirts and stickers.
And actually, whenever he, this is my favorite one. Whenever he used to do like footwork advertising for his photography business, or like if he did like a thank you bag for choosing his business, he always included an afro pic with like his logo on it, and that's a super smart use of your style.
I mean, I think you could do stickers for your channel, and people would certainly, they would love those. I
used to have them on a shirt. A couple people bought them, but I shut down the shop. That's merch is hard.
Merch is hard. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, merch is really hard. I'm what I want is I just want, and this is actually on the marketing side of things, or just like kind of changing my brand. I've really been I've paid a lot more attention to not swearing as much, even though like I bleep out my swearing, because like I want advertisers to like look at me and be like, oh, this guy's funny, but he's also he can be played on the loudspeaker at home with the kids running around, because like every little thing of that makes you more attractive to the people that
it broadens
pay for
your
ads.
audience, right?
Yeah. Like if most of these podcasts, since they're more kind of like laid back, most of them are getting, the first two are probably going to get limited ads.
Yeah.
Right. But like whenever I make this shorter form this 10-minute long content, I have been, and this is the reason why I bought a teleprompter and I started like writing scripts. Because if I just go, I'm cracking jokes.
Sure.
And
sure.
I'm bringing out
yeah,
my humor.
It helps you being organized.
Right.
Yeah.
But the script allows me to actually take that joke, be like, no, I don't need to do that joke. That's not necessarily appropriate. And so, you know, people might think that the scripts are like maybe not like genuine. They absolutely are, because I literally write the scripts as I'm thinking about it, as I'm speaking, and I'm like, nope, that is not good for the brand. You know, that's the kind of joke I would make outside of like the YouTube.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
every little bit of thing that you improve, and the fact that I can flow and can be funny is more attractive to the people that are willing to buy ad slots on YouTube. And if I want to make that a little bit better, instead of just censoring the F word with a bleep, which I think has comedic effect, you know, I think it's funny. I can just not do that at all.
Do you know, what's his name? Dan Pomeyer, I think he does Dr. Doofenshmirtz on Phineas and Ferb.
No,
do you know who that is?
No.
He just did a short on YouTube Reels or whatever it was, or TikTok, that somebody had taken Phineas and Ferb the cartoon and just bleeped it out at random times. It's absolutely hilarious, and it's like a reaction of him watching all these characters that he's drawn, you know, and they're bleep, bleep.
I've seen that with like
great.
Harry Potter. Like they censor it at like the perfect time.
Yeah.
It is really funny.
I think that's some good stuff right there.
But yeah, I've so any like outside of this podcast, if you have any suggestions on how to make the Z-Wade Photo YouTube channel more marketable to like advertisers and stuff like that, that might be like a kind of a cool shorter form kind of conversation.
We could definitely talk about that.
That would be a cool conversation to have. By the way, if you're not a member of the Z-Wade Photo YouTube channel yet, we actually have 2 tiers. Now, the highest tier is going to allow you to get all of my content way before everybody else, something like 30 videos before anybody else gets to see them. And also you get access to the Image Circle Discord, which, by the way, is the only way that you're going to get to talk to me outside of the comment section, because, you know, I like to keep my socials totally business related and private. And there's also a lower tier for $1.99. You actually just get access to the Image Circle podcast. So if you don't care about seeing all my stuff early, but you still want to come and hang out with us and share the photos that you take on a daily basis, you can still get into the Image Circle Discord.
And for $3.99, there's the ASMR channel.
That's right. And for $11.99, you get my OnlyFans.
You have an OnlyFans?
No.
Look at my lens,
not.
Baby.
Yeah, that's what I need to do. Lens ASMR, just doing the lens caps.
You'd be like that model that's like, you know, like wheels, and she puts her nail and be like lens zoom.
Yeah, you could just do the ASMR of like the manual focus, the electric motors. Although a lot of them are getting a little too quiet. So, at what point is it better to just kind of cut your losses and go for like a rebrand?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say that's really on a case-by-case basis. You know, rebrands are something that are kind of like a last-ditch effort.
It's like bankruptcy. You know, it's like
not necessarily
last chance to save yourself.
Yeah, like not necessarily financial, but like if you've had a lot of bad press or something like that, or maybe you had a business partner that kind of messed things up and they're no longer associated or something, you know, that might be a good time to rebrand. You know, yeah, I would say, you know, that's kind of like a last ditch thing.
Mm-hmm. At what point? I mean, is it just like when everything is finally going wrong, like the bad press, the bad reviews, the reputation is just in the tank? I mean, is there any like drastic method to recover from that kind of thing?
You know, I would say some of the most iconic brands that you know of have had really bad press, and they haven't had bad enough press to be like, okay, we're going to change Nike to whatever.
Right.
You know, like, but then again, there has been like Facebook rebranded with Meta, and everybody was like, nah, it's still Facebook. Like,
I
you know,
absolutely
come on. I mean, Twitter is still, you know, has been rebranded to X. It's still Twitter. Like, you know, there's no getting away from it.
People tried doing the X, formerly known as Twitter, but they're just back to calling it Twitter.
Yeah,
now.
they're just calling it tweets. And I mean, what do you call it with an X? Like, there's nothing to call it with X. Like, you know, what is it, like It's a tweet. You know,
did you catch my?
Yeah. Did you catch my lowercase x? You know, like, no, it doesn't work like that.
It's a tweet.
Yeah, I would stay away from rebrands unless it's something totally drastic. The other thing I would say is you might want to rebrand if you completely change the direction of your business. So if you have a photography business that's like, you know, primarily newborns, and then you go into doing boudoir or something, right? Like, you're not going to want to use the same brand.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. I ran into that. The reason whenever I was taking on paid work, I opted to do less paid work with less advertising because I already had like my art portfolio at zwadephoto.com. Right. But out of that actually came like a cool idea to kind of separate the two. So Z-Wade Photo has generally been like my artwork and like from my YouTube and the stuff like that. But as far as like the things I want to provide, such as if I ever get into like the merch or getting into paid work again, it's not going to be under that. I have some like my own presets. I have a few people asking like about like my presets and stuff.
Right.
And so if I decide to do that like in the future, all of that is gonna come out of like WadeWorks. Right. Yeah. Not Z-Wade Photo, but
there's still a connection to it, right? I mean,
there's a small connection, but as far as like I don't want people going to zwadephoto.com to see my art if I'm also doing senior photos, because you don't want to hire the guy with like bodyscape and nude to do like senior photos.
Right.
Even though it's doing
a different thing.
Right before the Z30 died again from getting too hot. Yeah, you were just talking about this other website that you have, and I'd like you to elaborate on that because I want people to hear about that.
So we were talking about like branding and multiple brands, and I have, you know, my main company, the company that's registered is CheckSix Creative Studio. And then I have a brand underneath it called My Bombshells, and My Bombshells does, you know, pinup calendars, aviation calendars, T-shirts and posters, things like that. It's basically where I showcase my aviation photography, but it is not a separate company. It's just a brand of CheckSix Creative Studio. And so, you know, if you're going to have different things that you do, you certainly want to focus the market, you know, focus your customers, and it may make sense to have a brand of something.
It's kind of like what they recommend actually for YouTube. Like they always recommend to niche down.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't want to have like CheckSix Studios that does all these 5,000 different things.
Right.
It's like you have CheckSix Studios, but you also have like My Bombshells, and then you might have another name for like your senior photography aspect. But it's like the umbrella kind of.
I don't do senior photos, but I do have a channel for My Bombshells. I have a channel for CheckSix Creative Studio, and I have another channel that's just specifically for basically client portfolio work. So when and that channel really doesn't have any followers or anything, but when I go do, you know, basically I'll do a proposal. Proposal is the word I was looking for. I'll do a proposal for a customer, and I'll grab the YouTube videos from there, you know, and because I make sure I put my branding on them and that sort of thing. So yeah, it definitely makes sense to focus your audience where you can, but it's totally okay to have kind of sub brands of your main brand.
Sure.
You know, if you're going to be doing totally different things. Now that said, you know, it's not a lot of people can branch out and do like 5 different things and be good at all of them, right? So you might want to pick out the one that you're best at and kind of focus on that, and maybe branch out, you know, later on down the line.
Right. But yeah, all of those brands are going to be in the description below, so you can go and check those out, all those channels, all that good stuff. So make sure you go and check that out. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap of this episode of the Image Circle podcast. I want to thank Chris Batcheller from CheckSix Creative Studios for being here. Chris, why don't you tell people where they can find you? Yeah,
so you can find me on the web at checksixstudio.com, and we're also on Instagram at CheckSixStudio, and you can also check out, I have another website called mybombshells.com. That's my e-commerce site. And and I also I'm also an author. We didn't talk about that, but I have a book on Amazon called The Dad's Divorce Guide. So lots of places to find me on the web.
All of that will be in the description box below, of course. But for now, I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade, and Z-Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.